So the first reading is 1 Samuel 16, 4 to 13. Samuel did what the Lord said. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled. When they met him, they asked, "Do you come in peace?" Samuel replied, "Yes, in peace I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice with me." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Jesse then had Shammah pass before Samuel. "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" "There is still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He is tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. Samuel then went to Ramah. The second reading is 1 Corinthians 1 verses 26 to 31. Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. It is because of him that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom from God, that is, our righteousness, holiness, and redemption. Therefore, as it is written, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord.
Chosen by God, then. This is what we are looking about and thinking about this morning. The fact that we are chosen by God. And last week, we thought about listening to God. Thank you very much for that. I very much enjoyed listening to it. I was sadly not able to be here. But it was talked about how listening needs to be active. You've got to listen for the squeaky rhubarb. It stuck with me, see? You've got to listen for the squeaky rhubarb. That we have to actively listen. And it doesn't depend on how old we are or how wise we are, but God does speak to us. God does speak to us. And when we recognize that, we need to ponder it, we need to think about it, and we need to obey that calling. So we're going to focus a bit more today on how we are chosen by God, how God speaks to us and gives us a purpose, gives us something that we need to do, that we can focus on. So I was born ages ago now, 1992. I'm sure all of you think that's so old, you know. But I was born ages ago. I'm a product of the 90s. I very much enjoyed the advertisement for the Cliff College Festival this year, going back to the VHS and the cassettes and even the portable CD player thing, because I had all of those growing up. But one craze that was huge when I was growing up and has endured, in fact, to this day, was Pokemon. We're familiar with Pokemon? Yeah, Pokemon. I was never massively into it myself, but it was massive. And even now, people are on Pokemon Go still. I think I still see people going around doing that. And this was one of the sort of biggest crazes around at the time. People trading cards. There was a TV program. The whole works. And I was thinking about choosing. The first thing, I got to be honest, that popped into my head was Pokemon, I Choose You, which was the title of the first episode of the Pokemon series. It seemed appropriate because Pokemon. I'm not going to try and say that Pokemon is gospel here because no. Pokemon was all about catching these monsters. It was about building a team, and then it was about battling other monsters. But there was some tactics to it. There was some thinking involved, or as much as there ever is in a sort of video game type style thing. And for copyright reasons, I couldn't put actual Pokemon pictures on the screen. I'm sorry. You'll have to use your imaginations. Because different Pokemon had different skills, and they were weak to different things, okay? They were weak to different things. Water was strong against rock Pokemon. Fire was strong against plant Pokemon, and all that sort of stuff. And so when you were choosing your team, when you were choosing which Pokemon you had to use, you needed to take into account the skills of that Pokemon and its alignment and what it could do and how you were going to use it. And so I was like, yes, that's great. I'll use that as my nice opening bit this morning because it's the same. Just as we found when we were picking our champions earlier, when you've got a task for someone or when you've got something that needs to be done, you choose the right tool for the job. You choose the right person to help you or do it for you. You know, if you're like me and you hate plumbing, you just get somebody else to do that. And so that's what we're going to think about today. We're thinking about how God chooses us and why God might choose us. And I'm going to try and keep this brief. I know I tend to ramble on, as I'm doing right now. So I'm going to keep it short. And we're going to look at a couple of people, and then we're going to think about ourselves. So first, we're going to think about David. We're going to think about David, because he was chosen by God. He was chosen by God. Now, when I went to school, and this is not a tangent, it will make sense. When I went to school at Lady Manners. I don't know if any of you know Lady Manners. It's in Bakewell, about 40 minutes down the road. As I was growing up, my school specialised in rugby. Some schools specialise in football. This school specialised in rugby, and so PE or sports or whatever you want to call it, games. I think it was called games when I was there. It was all about rugby. And this was fine. I have nothing against rugby. Quite enjoy rugby. Quite like watching the Six Nations. But for the majority of my school career, I was this tall until I was about 18, and I weighed about 5.5 stone, 6 stone. And rugby is not a game for short people who don't weigh a lot. It was really not my jam. I was not very good at it. I distinctly remember being required to play rugby, and I'd like going for a tackle, and I'd tackle this guy, and then I'd just get dragged the rest of the way across the field because he was significantly taller and significantly bigger than me. It was not my game. But that is not to say that I could not play sports. Anyone who was in my youth club will tell you that I had a very successful bulldog career at youth club because I was quite small and I was quite fast and I was quite hard to pin down, and I could get across the other side of that field without being tackled very well. Sadly, that is not a game you can play nowadays. Health and safety gone crazy, right? You know. But it wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It wasn't that I didn't have skills. It was just that I wasn't applying them in the right place when I was playing rugby, because it was just not what I was built for. So what do we know about David then? What do we know about David? He was the littlest. He was the youngest. See, it translates. He was the littlest. He was the youngest of a mess load of siblings. He had 8 brothers and at least 2 sisters that we know about. And I cannot imagine what that must have been like. I'm very fortunate to be the oldest child. And whilst that comes with its own unique challenges as well, if Ben is my youngest brother is to be believed, being the youngest is no picnic either. I'm sure some other people in here can testify to that. So I cannot imagine what it must have been like to have 8 siblings, at least, that were older than you, that had done it all before you. Like, where was your sort of defining characteristic in that? Where was David's defining characteristic in that? To the point that when Samuel came around, came calling, David was left behind. He was left in the field. He was left watching the sheep while Samuel came to look over the sons of Jesse. But that isn't entirely a bad thing, because he was also trusted. We know that David was trusted because they wouldn't have left the sheep with him if he wasn't trusted. And being a shepherd was quite an important thing back then. It's quite an important thing. It was a responsibility, and it could be quite a dangerous one, wolves or whatever coming after the sheep. So he was trusted, but he was also humble, and I'm sure he learned a lot about leading people from leading all those sheep around. We know that David was not always perfect. Even after he became king, he made mistakes. He had challenges that he did not rise to meet, and he struggled. But we also know that when he was challenged by Nathan about his failures, he was repentant. He humbled himself before God and was repentant. So why did God choose David? Why did he not stick with Saul? Why did he not choose one of David's older brothers? It says, the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance," David's older brother, "or his height. I have rejected him. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." God could see David's heart, and he had a purpose for him, and he chose him, even if nobody else could see it at the time. Now, just because you are asked to do something or chosen to do something doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get done. So we're going to think about Mary in a minute, but first, before we do that, I'd like to give you some insight into our family life at home. Because we have Samuel and Elizabeth, two beautiful young children, love them to bits, but it's quite hard to get them to do things. It's very hard to get them to do things. In Samuel's case, sometimes it's quite hard to get him to behave in a way that is, suitable for the outside world, and not like hit people or shout and scream. And when he does those things, he ends up like this in timeout. And this inevitably leads to the usual struggle and let me out, because he doesn't like being in timeout. And then the final consequence of this is, very sad, very repentant, sorry, won't do it again. And then 5 minutes later he does it again, of course. It can be quite hard to get Samuel to do what he needs to do, to behave in the way we need him to behave. And you'd think it would be easier with Elizabeth. But no, we get this. She's been asked to go and get dressed here, and not just to get dressed because we need her dressed, but because we want to go to the cinema. We think, yeah, great, cinema. No, don't want to get dressed. We can be chosen, we can be asked to do things, but sometimes we don't want to do them. Sometimes we don't want to do them. Even if we look in the Bible, some of these legendary figures, Moses, for example, didn't really want to take on that role that God had chosen him for. He fought back against it, he pushed back against it, and in the end God had to give him a bunch of help from various other people in order to get that job done. But let's talk about Mary. Because Mary was not like that. Mary was willing. She was a bit confused when the angel came and said, "You're going to give birth." And she was like, "What? How?" But she was willing. "I am the Lord's servant," Mary answered. "May your word to me be fulfilled." She was willing. She did not fight. She did not protest that calling, that chosenness, that purpose that God had for her. She was willing, and she went along with it. And she was humble. She didn't let the sort of the craziness go to her head. I feel like if an angel came down now and said to me, "Greetings, you who are highly favored," I'd be shouting about that to everybody, right? I'd be all over that one. But Mary didn't. She didn't let it go to her head. Even though, again, there was a point where people were shouting to her, "Blessed are you among women. Blessed is the child you will have." You'd think again, she's carrying the Son of God, right? You'd think she'd be pretty like, "Whoa, yeah, get me." But no, she was humble. She was willing to take on the task God had for her, the purpose God had for her, and she accepted being chosen. She treasured up these things in her heart. God saw her heart. He had a purpose for her, and he chose her. So there's two examples from the Bible. Let's think about us, though. Let's think about us. We are also chosen. Yes. Excellent. Good. But I don't know about you guys, but when I kind of reflect on the things that God might choose me for, I often come up a little bit blank. It's quite hard to sometimes reflect on your own being and be like, yes, that's awesome. That's why God needs me. I've always considered myself a bit of a jack of all trades, but a master of none sort of thing. I am extraordinarily fortunate, though, in my life to have been chosen by God to first be a teacher, to now be an auditor doing what I'm doing, to be the parents of Samuel and Elizabeth. Kate, for some crazy unknown reason, chose me as her husband, despite the fact that in our first meeting she said hello and I was so awkward that I just turned around and walked away. Yeah, true story. But obviously, there are things that I can't see about myself. And a couple of years back, well, I don't know how long it was ago now, maybe 3, Elizabeth, with significant help from Katie, hello. Okay. Decided to tell me about some of those things that they liked about me. And they made me this book, and it's called My Daddy Is. So we're going to run through, and in the interest of time, I won't get you to try and guess what it is that they were based on the pictures. I'll just kind of throw it out there, but you can try and come up with it as you go. So the first one is one you've seen before. My daddy is a scientist. My daddy is a cheese lover. This is something Elizabeth has very much inherited from me, and Samuel. They very much like it when I go to the special nice cheese shop, and then they eat all of my cheese before I get a chance. My daddy is a bookworm. A fixer. I have told you how much I hate plumbing, and this is why. A musician. Here we go. A geek. I guess there are some upsides to it. I actually have a print of this on my wall in my study. I very much like that picture. It's very cool. And possibly most importantly, a disciple. Now, Els and Sam did not get to choose me as their father, nor did I actually get to choose them, to be honest. But God chose us for each other, and I'm very blessed that He has done that. I'm very blessed that He has done that. It seems that I do have some redeeming qualities, though maybe not the cheese one. We'll see. So why would God choose you then? Why would God choose you or me? Does being chosen depend on how old you are? These guys are grandparents, semi-middle-aged. Does it depend on how wise or how clever you are? Does it depend on being perfect or making no mistakes? Does it depend on looking good or having the right stuff? The answer is no, and thank goodness, because if the answer wasn't no, this very ill-advised tribute to MC Hammer's Can't Touch This that I did one youth club retreat would have ruined things for me in the long term. The answer is no. It does not depend on any of those things. In Corinthians, we are told, consider your calling. Not many of you were wise according to worldly standards. Not many of you were powerful. Not many were noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. He chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. He chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring things to nothing, things that are. God sees your heart, and He has a purpose for you, even if you're not sure what it is yet. You are chosen. God has chosen you for something, and I can guarantee that. Our job then, as was highlighted last week, is to listen for that calling. And I mean really listen. Listen for the squeaky rhubarb. Thank you, Alison. Listen and obey. When we hear God, we need to be open to it. He's chosen you for a reason. But He won't ever ask you to do something that cannot be accomplished with His help. So listen to God and rely on Him.